Bitcoin Cash has lost 99.5% of its value in 5 years against Bitcoin. So the market's trying to tell you it doesn't like that idea. But the idea was wrong on the surface, because if you're changing the protocol economically, it's an ethical lapse. And so when you actually when you monkey with the block size, you're screwing with the economics for the miners. And when you're messing up the economics for the miners, you're undermining the integrity of transaction fees. And when you do that, you're undermining the integrity of the security of the network. So generally, I think my view at this point is any kind of software upgrade that materially changes the protocol for any reason other than to cure a fatal security bug is probably an ethical lapse, right? And you need to be very, very conservative on those things, like extremely conservative, because you're changing the economics for all the actors. And so that's why the right answer is don't hard fork the thing. Don't change it. Literally, just don't change it, right? Engineers want to change things, but if your solution to improving a crypto is write code, it's probably an ethical lapse, because the integrity from Bitcoin comes from work, right? You want to improve the security of Bitcoin, you spend billions of dollars buying Bitcoin mining equipment and turn it on. And then you spend billions on energy and turn it on. Or you want to improve Bitcoin, you buy $1 billion of Bitcoin and you put it in cold storage. That's expensive, right? You want to tweak a line of code because it makes you feel better. That's cheap, but it's a real moral hazard. And so I think that the Bitcoiners that fought that block size war and they were on the right side of ethics and technology. I think if you look out in the future, the assets that win in the next 100 years are the ones that are technically sound, ethically sound, and economically sound, right? And if you're monkeying with hyper complicated software such that your network gets hacked or it crashes or it goes down, it's not technically sound. And every time you push a hard fork, you ought to say to yourself, in about a decade, I'll know whether I introduced a fatal bug. That's how risky it is. Like 5 to 10 years, probably 10 years later, you can say, well, I think the code might be technically sound. That's just how sensitive that is with regard to something like a layer one base layer. And I think with regard to economics, right? You can't change the economics of the network. So when you destroy the miner's economics, you destroy the integrity of the network. And when you advantage one constituency over another constituency, you undermine the integrity of the network, and then nobody trusts it. And you have to be able to extrapolate out 100 years in order to trust it. So I think that conservatism on the base layer is important. As for what I think will happen over the next 30 years, I have a model which is multi-layered. I mean, this simple model, which is, okay, there's a layer one and it does everything. That's just too simplistic and monolithic. And I just think it's wrong. It's intellectually bankrupt and wrong. That's one of the problems with the thousands of cryptos that think that they have to build layer ones to do transactions. It's just a wrong idea. The universe doesn't work with one element, and it doesn't work at one frequency. A better idea is there's a monetary network that's the property base, and that's Bitcoin. That's like granite or schist in Manhattan. And the speed with which you can move 1 million tons of schist in Manhattan is very slow. I mean, by that standard, if I told you I could move all of Central Park every 130 milliseconds, you would think I was magical. But Central Park hasn't moved in 100 years, maybe in 1,000 years. The bedrock under Manhattan is 200 million years old. You don't need to move the foundation of the world every millisecond in order to build the world. Then you need to build things on top of it. So the stuff on top of it are buildings, they last 100 years. And the things in the buildings are businesses, they last 5 years. And the people that are patronizing the business are consumers. They're in there for 3 hours. And so when you see the world moving at 100 million year frequency, 100-year frequency, a 5-year frequency, and a 3-hour frequency, you realize that's life. Trying to make everything move at the same frequency is wrong, and trying to use the same elements is wrong. Like, I want to build a building on schist. Well, how do I see through the window of a schist building? That makes no sense. Okay, so like most of these proof of stake networks, it's kind of like building a glass house on a beach. It's a beautiful view. It lasts for a few years. A hurricane comes along, wipes it all out. And like, is there a place for a glass house on a beach? I don't know. How stable is the beach? Is it in a hurricane, tunnel? A logical building is, I have granite, I'm on schist, I have glass, and I have steel. Right? There's 4 elements. Right? I mean, it's common sense. Walk through Manhattan and look at the building. Steel, granite, on bedrock, looking through glass. Okay, if I took, which of those elements do I take away? None of them. You need them all. Okay, so how's the world going to evolve? Well, the foundation is a very high integrity, highly secure, stable layer 1. The most stable one is Bitcoin. It's proof of work. It needs to be a commodity. It can't be a security. Can't have an issuer. It doesn't, 7 transactions a second is fine. It doesn't need to do any more than that. If I could move all of San Francisco every 135 milliseconds, it'd be too fast. It's fast enough. I just want to build something on San Francisco. You could put $100 trillion of monetary energy into the base layer. You could put $500 trillion of monetary energy into the base layer. Doesn't need any more functionality. We just need for no one to break it, right? Mm-hmm. That's why I say we don't really want well-meaning engineers like meddling with the base layer. Just don't break it. Leave it alone. Now, what's above it? Well, what makes Bitcoin ethical is the fact that it's open and permissionless without an issuer. So the layer 2 would be Lightning, which is an open permissionless transaction protocol, not moving or storing $500 billion of value, but storing $50,000 of value. If I reduce the amount of value at risk by a factor of 1,000,000, I can increase the speed by a factor of 1,000,000, right? And the functionality, I can decrease the cost of transactions by a factor of 1,000,000.